I asked an alien about the pyramid. What he revealed about the Anunnaki will change history forever. Before I start, I need you to do something for me. Right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Your bedroom, your car, walking your dog, laying in bed with headphones on at 3 a.m. I don't care. Just tell me. Because if this video disappears tomorrow, if my account gets wiped, if I suddenly stop existing, at least I'll know somebody, somewhere, heard what I'm about to tell you before they erased me. And trust me, they will try. They've done it before to people who knew far less than what I'm about to share. So comment. Right now. I'll wait. Okay. My name is Marcus Webb, former Sergeant, United States Army Intelligence. 12 years of service, specialized in interrogation and linguistic analysis. And before you think this is just another conspiracy nut job with a camera and too much time on his hands, let me be clear. I was stationed at Groom Lake. You know it better as Area 51. From 2019 to 2021, my job was to communicate with non-terrestrial entities. That's the official term they used. Non-terrestrial entities. Not aliens. Not extraterrestrials. Those words were actually forbidden in briefings. We called them NTEs, and I was one of 7 people in the entire facility cleared to interact with them directly. Now, I'm going to tell you something that will sound absolutely insane. 3 months ago, I sat across from a dying alien and asked him a question that's haunted humanity for thousands of years. Why do the pyramids exist? Not how were they built. Why? What was their actual purpose? And what he told me about the Anunnaki, about human history, about what's coming in 2027. It's going to change everything you think you know about our species, about religion, about government, about why you feel the way you feel every single day of your life. But here's the thing. I shouldn't be alive right now. I shouldn't be recording this. The people who arranged that conversation, who brought me face to face with Subject 7 one last time, they never intended for me to walk out of that facility. I escaped. Barely. And I know they're looking for me. I know this video might be taken down within hours of posting. I know some of you will write this off as fiction, as creative writing, as entertainment. That's fine. That's actually perfect. As long as some of you hear what I'm saying and start asking questions, start looking at the world differently, then maybe I didn't risk everything for nothing. So let me be absolutely clear about what's at stake here.
If what Subject 7 told me is true, and I have every reason to believe it is, then everything you've been taught about human civilization is a lie. The pyramids weren't tombs. Ancient gods weren't mythological. And the worst part, the system that enslaved our ancestors never ended. It just evolved. It got smarter. And we're living inside it right now, feeding it every single day without even knowing it. I'm going to tell you this story from the beginning. How I got the call. How they found me.
How they brought me to an off-book facility that doesn't officially exist. How I watched Subject 7 die while revealing secrets that powerful people have killed to protect. I'm going to tell you what the Anunnaki really were, what they did to us, and why the global elite are preparing for something in 2027 that most of humanity doesn't even see coming. But I need you to understand something first. Once you hear this, you can't unhear it. You'll start seeing the patterns everywhere. In the news. In your phone. In the way governments manufacture crisis after crisis. In the way religions keep billions of people channeling their emotional energy toward invisible masters. You'll realize that the farm never closed. We just stopped recognizing the bars of our cage. And that knowledge, that awareness, it comes with a weight. It'll change how you see everything. Some of you are already feeling it, aren't you? That weird sense that something's fundamentally wrong with the world, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is. That feeling that we're being herded towards something. That modern life, despite all its technology and progress, feels increasingly hollow and controlled. You're not crazy, you're waking up. And what I'm about to tell you is going to accelerate that process, whether you're ready for it or not. So here's your last chance. If you want to stay comfortable, if you want to keep believing in the official story, close this video right now. Go back to scrolling. Go back to sleep. No judgment. But if you're ready to know why ancient civilizations built impossible structures, why powerful people are obsessed with symbols and rituals, why human suffering seems almost engineered into our society, then keep listening. Because Marcus Webb is about to tell you exactly what a dying alien revealed about the Anunnaki, the pyramids, and the harvest that's been happening to humanity for thousands of years. And it starts with a phone call I received at 2:34 in the morning 3 months ago. A call from a blocked number. a voice I didn't recognize, and an offer that seemed too good to be true. Spoiler alert, it was. But by the time I realized what I'd walked into, it was already too late to turn back. The thing about truth is, once you're exposed to it, once you see behind the curtain, there's no going back to who you were before. You're changed, forever. And now, I'm about to change you too. So let me take you back to that night. October 17th, 3 months ago. I was living in a studio apartment in Henderson, Nevada, about 30 minutes outside Vegas. Nothing fancy. After they discharged me from Groom Lake in 2021, I'd been working private security, trying to live quiet, trying to forget the things I'd seen in those underground levels, trying to sleep without seeing Subject 7's eyes staring at me every time I closed mine. Most nights I'd drink just enough whiskey to knock myself out around midnight. That night was no different, except it was about to become very, very different. My phone rang at exactly 2:34 a.m. I know the exact time because I stared at my alarm clock for a solid 10 seconds before my brain registered what was happening. The ringtone cut through my apartment like a knife. Now, here's the thing. I'd changed my number 4 times since leaving Area 51. I'd switched carriers. I'd gone through burner phones. The only people who had my current number were my sister in Ohio and exactly 2 guys from my unit who I trusted with my life. So when I saw a blocked caller lighting up my screen at 2:34 in the morning, every instinct I'd developed in 12 years of military intelligence started screaming at me not to answer it. But I did. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe some part of me had been waiting for this call ever since they escorted me off the base with a severance check and a stack of NDAs thick enough to stop a bullet. I swiped to answer and didn't say anything, just listened. For about 5 seconds, there was nothing but empty static, the kind that makes your skin crawl because you know someone's there, breathing, listening, deciding what to say. Then came the voice, digitally distorted, processed through some kind of modulator that made it sound almost robotic, but not quite. Just wrong, just human enough to be unsettling. "Sergeant Marcus Webb," the voice said. Not a question, a statement. "We have a proposition for you." I should have hung up right there. Should have thrown the phone across the room and started packing a bag. But then the voice said something that made my blood turn to ice. $200,000, cash, for 30 minutes of your time, doing what you do best. I sat up in bed, suddenly very awake, my heart hammering against my ribs. 200 grand. That's life-changing money for a guy working security at casino parking lots. But nothing in this world comes free, especially not money like that. "Who is this?" I finally asked, my voice rougher than I intended. "How did you get this number?" The voice ignored my questions completely. "You have a very specific skill set, Sergeant Webb. Language interpretation, psychological analysis, building rapport with difficult subjects." There was a pause, deliberate, calculated. "We need you to have a conversation. Just one conversation, 30 minutes. You ask the questions we provide, you record the answers, you walk away with enough money to disappear anywhere you want. Mexico, Thailand, doesn't matter. You'll never hear from us again." Every word was measured, rehearsed. This wasn't some random call. Someone had been planning this, watching me, waiting for the right moment. "I'm not interested," I said, and I meant it, sort of. The smart play was to hang up, break the phone, and be gone by sunrise. But then the voice said the one thing that guaranteed I'd take the meeting. "It's about Subject 7. My finger froze over the end call button. Subject 7. That designation should have been buried so deep in classified archives that saying it out loud should trigger immediate federal response. That name shouldn't exist outside of 3 underground levels at Groom Lake. I'd never told anyone about Subject 7. Not my sister, not my drinking buddies, not the VA therapist who kept asking why I woke up screaming. So how the hell did this person know? "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, but my voice betrayed me. The voice on the other end made a sound that might have been a laugh if it wasn't so distorted. "Sergeant Webb, we know exactly what you did at Groom Lake. We know about the interrogation protocols. We know about the linguistic mapping you developed for non-terrestrial communication. We know that Subject 7 trusted you more than any other handler in that facility." Another pause. "And we know that you've been wondering what happened to him ever since they escorted you out. Well, he's been asking for you too." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Asking for me? Subject 7 could barely communicate when I left. The neural interface was failing. His biology was deteriorating faster than the medical team could compensate. The last time I saw him, he was basically catatonic, hooked up to life support systems that nobody really understood. "He's alive?" I heard myself ask, and immediately hated how desperate I sounded. "He's dying," the voice corrected, "which is why this needs to happen soon. We're offering you a chance to finish what you started, Sergeant, to get answers to questions you didn't even know you could ask, and to get paid very well for your trouble." I stood up, started pacing my apartment in the dark, phone pressed to my ear. This was insane. This was obviously a trap, but it was also the first time in 2 years that anyone had acknowledged Subject 7 even existed, let alone that I'd spent 18 months trying to understand him. "Where?" I asked. "Desert Rose Diner, Highway 375, mile marker 47, 48 hours from now, 3 p.m. Highway 375, the extraterrestrial highway, tourists called it. Middle of nowhere, Nevada, the kind of place where you could make someone disappear and nobody would find the body for years. Come alone," the voice continued. "Bring your military ID and nothing else. No weapons, no recording devices. Someone will be waiting for you in a back booth. They'll have verification that this is legitimate. After that, it's your choice whether you get in the car or not." "And if I don't show up?" I asked, already knowing I would. The voice was silent for a moment, and when it spoke again, the distortion couldn't quite hide the edge in it. "Then you spend the rest of your life wondering what Subject 7 wanted to tell you, what he's been waiting 2 years to say, the secrets he kept from everyone except you." The line went dead. No goodbye, no further instructions, just empty silence and the sound of my own breathing in the dark. I looked at my phone screen. Call ended. Duration, 2 minutes, 17 seconds. I sat back down on my bed, hands shaking slightly, and stared at the wall. $200,000. Subject 7 alive and asking for me. A meeting in the desert in 48 hours. Every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was a setup, that I should run, that nothing good could come from this. But the other part, the part that had spent 18 months talking to something not human, trying to understand an intelligence so alien it made my head hurt, that part was already decided. I was going to that diner. I was going to get in that car, because I needed to know what Subject 7 had been trying to tell me all along, even if it killed me, especially if it killed me, because some questions don't let you go. They haunt you, they eat at you, and the only thing worse than knowing a terrible truth is living with a question you'll never get to ask. Those 48 hours felt like 48 years. I didn't sleep, couldn't eat. Just sat in my apartment running through scenarios, most of them ending with me in a black site or a shallow grave in the desert. But I also couldn't stop thinking about Subject 7, about the way he'd looked at me during our last session, those massive black eyes trying to communicate something urgent, something important, before the guards came and told me my clearance had been revoked effective immediately. So when 3 p.m. rolled around on October 19th, I was already parked outside the Desert Rose Diner, 30 minutes early, watching the building like it might explode. Let me paint you a picture of this place, because it's important you understand just how isolated it was. Highway 375 runs through the emptiest part of Nevada, and that's saying something in a state that's 90% nothing. Mile marker 47 is roughly halfway between Rachel and Alamo, which means you're a solid hour from anything resembling civilization. The Desert Rose Diner looked like it had been dropped there by accident in the 1950s and forgotten. Faded turquoise paint peeling off concrete block walls. A gravel parking lot with maybe 6 spaces. One of those old neon signs that probably hadn't worked since Bush Sr. was president. There were 2 other vehicles in the lot. A rusted pickup truck that looked like it belonged to staff, and a black Chevy Suburban with tinted windows and government plates. Not obvious government plates, but if you know what to look for, you know. I sat in my car for exactly 3 minutes past 3 p.m. Not because I was scared. Well, not just because I was scared, but because you never show up exactly on time to a meeting like this. You watch, you assess, you look for the setup. The Suburban hadn't moved. Nobody had gone in or out of the diner. The only sign of life was a thin trail of smoke coming from what I assumed was the kitchen. Finally, I got out of my car, left my phone locked in the glove compartment like they'd instructed, and walked across that gravel lot feeling like I had a target painted on my back. The door chimed when I walked in, one of those old brass bells on a spring. The interior matched the exterior. Vintage Americana, frozen in time. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor, a counter with those spinning stools, and absolutely nobody in sight except for one man sitting in the back corner booth. He was exactly what you'd expect and somehow worse for it. Mid-40s, maybe early 50s. Black suit, white shirt, no tie. The kind of generic professional appearance that's designed to be forgotten 30 seconds after you look away. Dark hair with gray at the temples, clean-shaven, but it was his eyes that got me. Pale blue, almost gray, and completely empty. I've seen that look before. Spooks, intelligence operatives, people who've done things that hollowed them out from the inside. He didn't stand up when I approached, didn't offer his hand. Just gestured to the seat across from him with the kind of casual authority that comes from knowing you're completely in control of the situation. "Sergeant Webb," he said as I slid into the booth. His voice was different from the phone, no distortion, but flat, affectless, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized but didn't care about. "Thank you for coming." I didn't respond, just stared at him, waiting. In interrogation training, they teach you that silence is a weapon. Make them feel it, make them uncomfortable. But this guy didn't even blink. He reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, making sure I could see it wasn't a weapon, and pulled out a manila envelope, the kind that's reinforced, made to hold photographs. He slid it across the table, and I noticed his fingernails were perfectly manicured. Everything about this man was controlled, calculated, sterile. "Open it," he said. I did, and my stomach dropped. Inside were 8 photographs, printed on high-quality photo paper. Each one a perfectly clear image that should not have existed outside of classified archives. The first photo showed me in the observation room at Groom Lake, sitting across from Subject 7. The second showed me with the neural interface headset on, the one we use to facilitate communication. The third was a close-up of my face during a session, and I could see the expression, that mixture of fascination and horror that I'd tried so hard to hide from my superiors. But the worst ones were the last 3. They showed Subject 7 in distress, his body convulsing on the examination table, and me reaching out to stabilize him, breaking protocol, removing my protective gear to make direct contact. That moment had been classified so far above top secret that acknowledging it existed could put me in federal prison for the rest of my life. "We have 47 more, the man said calmly, as I stared at the photos with hands that had started shaking. Different angles, different sessions, including several where you violated direct orders to maintain physical distance from the subject." He paused, letting that sink in. "We also have audio recordings of your private logs, the ones you made against regulations, documenting your personal theories about Subject 7's communication attempts. Very interesting reading, by the way, especially your hypothesis about the mathematical patterns in his vocalizations corresponding to ancient Sumerian linguistic structures." My mouth went dry. Those logs had been encrypted on an air-gapped laptop that I'd destroyed before leaving the base, or so I thought. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Someone who represents interests that occasionally overlap with official channels, but aren't constrained by the same bureaucratic limitations." Translation: private sector, contractors. The kind of people who operate in the gaps between agencies, doing things that need to happen, but can't appear on any official record. "We're not here to threaten you, Sergeant Webb. We're here to offer you an opportunity." He leaned back in the booth, completely relaxed. "Subject 7 is dying. His biology is degrading faster than our medical team can compensate. He has perhaps 72 hours left, maybe less. And in his lucid moments, he's been asking for you specifically." I wanted to ask how that was possible, how Subject 7 could even communicate well enough to request anything, but the man continued before I could speak. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in the vehicle outside. We're going to take you to a facility, not Groom Lake, somewhere else, where you'll have approximately 30 minutes with Subject 7. You'll ask him specific questions that we provide. You'll document his responses using the recording equipment we supply. Then you'll be paid $200,000 in cash, driven back to your car, and we'll never contact you again." He tapped the envelope of photographs. "These will be destroyed. The audio logs will be erased. Your service record will remain clean. You'll be free to disappear anywhere in the world you choose." "And if I refuse?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. The man's expression didn't change. "Then these photographs get delivered to several federal agencies along with documentation of your protocol violations at Groom Lake. Your security clearance will be revoked retroactively, which means your entire military pension disappears. You'll be investigated for unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Your sister in Ohio, Sarah, isn't it, works at the elementary school in Columbus. She'll have FBI agents interviewing her about her brother's activities. Your life, as you know it, effectively ends. He said it without malice, without threat, just stating facts. We don't want to hurt anyone, Sergeant Webb. We just want answers. The same answers you've already extracted before. You're uniquely qualified for this. Subject 7 trusts you, or trusted you, whatever trust means to something like that. I sat there looking at this man, at these photographs, at the trap that had been so carefully laid out for me, and realized I'd never really had a choice. From the moment I answered that phone call at 2:34 a.m., from the moment I drove out here, maybe from the moment I first sat across from Subject 7 3 years ago, I'd been on a path that led to this booth in this dying diner in the middle of nowhere. What questions? I asked quietly. The man smiled again, that empty smile, and pulled out a second envelope. This one was thicker. Everything you need is in here. Read it in the vehicle. You'll have about 90 minutes during transport. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. There's a bathroom in the back. I suggest you use it now. It's going to be a long ride, and we won't be stopping. I didn't use the bathroom. Didn't need to. My body had gone into that hyper-aware state you get in combat situations. Everything non-essential just shuts down. I followed the man in the black suit out to the Suburban, the desert heat hitting me like a physical wall after the air-conditioned diner. The back door was already open. Inside, I could see 2 more men, both wearing the same generic dark suits, same empty expressions. One of them held up a black cloth hood. Not a bag, a hood. The kind designed for prisoner transport, with a drawstring at the neck. Professional. Standard procedure, the man from the diner said, his tone almost apologetic, but not quite. Nothing personal. I almost laughed at that. Nothing personal. Right. I was about to be hooded and driven to an unknown location to interrogate a dying alien for people who'd just blackmailed me with classified photographs. But sure, nothing personal. I climbed into the back seat and sat between the 2 men. They didn't speak. Didn't acknowledge me. One of them placed the hood over my head and tightened the drawstring. Not choking tight, but tight enough that I couldn't shake it off. The world went black except for tiny pinpoints of light where the weave wasn't perfectly dense. I felt the vehicle start moving, gravel crunching under the tires as we pulled out of the diner parking lot. Here's something most people don't know. When you take away someone's sight, their other senses don't actually get sharper. You just pay attention to them more. And I'd been trained at Fort Huachuca to maintain situational awareness even under sensory deprivation. So I started counting. Every turn, every stop, every change in road surface, building a mental map of where they were taking me. We turned left out of the parking lot. That would be northeast on Highway 375. I counted seconds in my head, estimating speed by the engine sound and the feeling of acceleration. 60 seconds at approximately 50 miles per hour. Then a right turn onto what felt like a rougher road, probably one of the unmarked dirt roads that branch off into the test ranges. The military owns millions of acres out here, most of it completely unmapped to the public. We drove for what I estimated was 12 minutes on this rough road, the Suburban bouncing over ruts and rocks. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were the engine, the tires, and the occasional crackle of a radio that one of the men was monitoring through an earpiece. I could smell their cologne, something expensive and subtle, mixed with gun oil. These guys were armed, no question. Then we hit pavement again, and the ride smoothed out. A private road probably, well maintained. We accelerated to maybe 70 miles per hour and stayed there for a long time. I counted turns, left, right, another left. Whoever was driving was taking a deliberately complicated route, trying to disorient me. But here's the thing about military navigation training. They teach you to maintain orientation, even when people are actively trying to confuse you. I estimated we were heading generally northeast, maybe 20 degrees off true north. The sun, what little I could sense through the hood, was on my right side, which confirmed it. We were driving deeper into the test range, probably toward the Tikaboo Valley area, maybe farther. Somewhere the government had a very good reason to keep people away from. After what I calculated was about 53 minutes, we slowed dramatically, and I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of a heavy security gate, not a chain-link fence, something serious. Hydraulic systems hissing, heavy metal sliding on metal. We stopped completely, and I heard voices outside the vehicle, muffled by the hood and the Suburban's thick windows. Identification being checked, credentials being verified. Then we were moving again, past the gate, and I could feel the road change beneath us. Smooth, almost too smooth. The kind of surface you only find at high-security government installations. We drove for another 8 minutes, made 3 more turns, and then stopped. The engine shut off. Hands gripped my arms, not rough but firm, and guided me out of the vehicle. My feet hit concrete. I could feel it through my shoes, perfectly level, slightly cool even through the rubber soles. Industrial flooring. I was walked forward approximately 40 feet. I counted steps, and then stopped. I heard another door, this one with an electronic lock. Beep, beep, beep of a keypad, then a heavy click, and the hiss of a pressure seal breaking. Someone was opening a door to a climate-controlled environment. The temperature difference hit me immediately, even through the hood. 10 degrees cooler, maybe 15. The air felt different too. Processed, filtered, the kind of air quality you only get in sealed facilities with serious HVAC systems. They walked me through the door and I heard it seal behind us. Now the sensory information got really interesting. My footsteps echoed differently. We were in a corridor, probably concrete walls, high ceiling. I counted 123 steps. Then we stopped again. Another electronic lock, another pressure seal. But this time when the door opened, I smelled something that triggered immediate recognition. Ozone, that sharp electric smell you get around high-voltage equipment or plasma systems. And underneath it, something else, something organic, but wrong, like the smell of a hospital mixed with something chemical, something that made my hindbrain scream that we were somewhere deeply unnatural. We'd entered the facility proper. Whatever this place was, it was buried. I could feel it. The air pressure was different. The ambient sound was that particular dead quality you only get in spaces with no connection to the outside world. We walked for another 2 minutes. Longer corridors, more turns, more sealed doors. Each one required electronic authorization. Each one hissed when it opened, confirming what I already suspected. This entire facility was compartmentalized, probably running positive pressure in some sections and negative in others. Contamination protocols, biological containment. This was a place designed to keep things in, not just people out. Finally, we stopped, and I heard a voice I didn't recognize. Female, clinical, detached. Subject is prepped and stable. You have 28 minutes before next degradation cycle. Minimal physical contact, 0 contamination tolerance. Questions only. Are we clear? Clear, someone responded, and then hands were removing the hood from my head. The light hit me like a hammer. Fluorescent and LED combined. That particular shade of blue-white that makes everything look dead and surgical. I blinked, eyes adjusting, and found myself in an observation room. Small, maybe 10 by 10 feet. 3 walls were painted concrete. The 4th wall was glass. No, not glass. Something thicker. Polycarbonate, probably. Probably 3 inches thick and rated to contain, well, to contain whatever was on the other side. And on the other side, in a sealed chamber that looked like a cross between an ICU and something from a science fiction movie, was Subject 7. He was strapped to a medical table that looked nothing like human medical equipment, surrounded by machines I didn't recognize, covered in sensors and tubes and monitoring equipment. But even through all of that, even through the obvious degradation of his physical form, I recognized him. Those eyes, black and massive and fixed directly on me. And in that moment, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. 1, Subject 7 was dying exactly like they'd said. 2, he'd been waiting for me. And 3, whatever he was about to tell me, people had been willing to kidnap, blackmail, and transport me to a black site to hear it, which meant it was either incredibly valuable, incredibly dangerous, or both. The man in the black suit appeared beside me, holding a tablet and a small recording device. "You have 30 minutes, he said, his voice flat and professional. "The questions are on the tablet. Follow them in order. Record everything. Subject 7's communication capability is degraded but functional through the neural interface. You remember how to use it." He pointed to a headset mounted on the wall next to the observation window. The same type I'd used at Groom Lake, but modified, updated. "And Sergeant Webb?" He waited until I looked at him. "Ask the questions exactly as written. Don't improvise. Don't go off script. We'll know if you do. And your sister in Ohio doesn't need that kind of attention. Are we clear?" I wanted to hit him, wanted to grab that tablet and smash it into his face, but instead I just nodded, took the equipment, and walked toward the window where Subject 7 was waiting. Because some questions, as I said before, don't let you go. They haunt you, and I was about to get answers to questions I didn't even know existed. Questions about pyramids, about gods that weren't gods. about a harvest that had been happening to humanity for thousands of years, and about why Subject 7, with the last hours of his life, had asked for me specifically. The clock was ticking, 28 minutes. I put on the neural interface headset, picked up the tablet, and began to read the first question. And that's when everything I thought I knew about human history started to unravel. Before I get into what Subject 7 told me, I need you to understand the place where this conversation happened. Because the facility itself tells you everything you need to know about how deep this goes, how much money is being spent on something the public doesn't even know exists. This wasn't Groom Lake. This wasn't Area 51. I'd spent 18 months at Groom Lake and I knew every level, every corridor, every security protocol. This place was different, newer, deeper, and completely off the books. I'm talking about a facility that doesn't appear on any government budget, any congressional oversight committee, any inspector general's report. The kind of place that gets funded through black budget allocations buried so deep in defense spending that even most senators don't know it exists. The observation room where they'd removed my hood was just the beginning. Once my eyes adjusted to the lighting, and let me tell you about that lighting because it's important, I started noticing details that made my skin crawl. The illumination throughout the facility wasn't normal fluorescent or LED. It was this specific shade of blue-white, almost UV spectrum, the kind of lighting you use in biological containment labs because certain wavelengths kill airborne pathogens. Every surface was sealed concrete or stainless steel. No windows, obviously, because we were underground, but also no decorative elements, no signage, no safety posters or emergency exit maps. Nothing that could identify what this place was or who operated it. Just sterile, functional infrastructure designed for a single purpose: containment and study. Through the observation window, I could see into Subject 7's containment cell, but when I turned around to look at the room I was standing in, I noticed cameras, lots of them. Small, high-resolution units mounted in every corner, covering every angle, and the door I'd entered through had no handle on the inside, only a card reader and what looked like a biometric scanner. I was locked in. The man in the black suit and his colleagues had stepped outside, leaving me alone with the tablet, the recording equipment, and that neural interface headset. Alone, but very much watched. I could feel the weight of surveillance, of people in another room monitoring every word, every gesture, ready to terminate this whole thing if I stepped out of line. But what really got to me was the ambient sound, or the lack of it. You know how every building has its own acoustic signature? The hum of ventilation, the distant sound of plumbing, footsteps from other floors, traffic from outside. This place had none of that. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft mechanical breathing of the life support systems on the other side of the glass, and a low-frequency hum that I could feel more than hear. That hum was familiar. I'd felt it at Groom Lake in the deeper levels. Some kind of EM shielding, probably. Faraday cage technology integrated into the entire structure to prevent any electromagnetic signals from getting in or out. This facility was a black hole. Information went in, but it didn't leave unless someone with serious clearance decided it should. I walked closer to the observation window, and that's when I started noticing the details of Subject 7's containment cell. The room beyond the polycarbonate barrier was roughly 20 feet by 20 feet, with walls that had that same sealed concrete look, but covered in something else, some kind of metallic mesh embedded in the surface. More EM shielding, probably, but also maybe something designed to dampen whatever frequencies Subject 7 might be able to generate. The ceiling was at least 12 feet high, dotted with sensors, cameras, and what looked like gas dispersion nozzles. In case of emergency, they could flood that room with sedatives or toxins or whatever they needed to neutralize him. The floor was slightly concave, sloping toward a central drain. Medical consideration or something more sinister? I tried not to think about what might need to be drained from that room. The medical table Subject 7 was strapped to wasn't built for human anatomy. It was custom fabricated, probably designed specifically for his physiology. Instead of normal restraints, he was held in place by what looked like magnetic clamps, and the whole apparatus could tilt, rotate, or reconfigure based on whatever position the medical team needed. Surrounding him was equipment I'd never seen before. Not at Groom Lake, not in any military medical facility. Some of it looked almost organic, with tubes and membranes that pulsed rhythmically.
Other components were clearly advanced technology. Holographic displays showing biological data I couldn't interpret, quantum computing interfaces running algorithms in real time, and what I can only describe as a hybrid life support system that seemed to bridge his biology with our technology in ways that shouldn't be possible. But here's what really disturbed me. The medical team that had obviously been working on Subject 7 was nowhere to be seen.
The equipment was running, the monitors were active, but no doctors, no nurses, no technicians, just machines keeping him alive, or keeping him alive enough for this conversation, which meant they'd cleared everyone out specifically for my arrival. They didn't want witnesses to whatever was about to be discussed. Even the people who'd been treating him, who presumably had some level of clearance, weren't allowed to be present for this. That told me the information Subject 7 was about to share wasn't just classified, it was compartmentalized beyond normal classification structures. Eyes only doesn't even begin to cover it. I could see 3 other doors in Subject 7's cell, all sealed, all with the same electronic locks and pressure seals. One probably led to a decontamination chamber. One probably led to the main medical access corridor. The third, that one was positioned directly behind his head, and something about its placement made me think it was an emergency extraction route, or maybe an emergency termination protocol, a way to flood the room, seal it off, and dispose of everything inside if containment was breached. I'd seen similar setups at biological warfare research facilities. The fact that they needed it here told me exactly how dangerous they considered Subject 7, even in his dying state. The observation room had one other feature I hadn't noticed initially, a small airlock-style chamber built into the wall next to the observation window. It was about 2 feet square, with doors on both sides, one facing me, one facing Subject 7's cell. An item transfer system. If I needed to pass something physical to him, or if he needed to pass something to me, it would go through that chamber with full decontamination protocols. The fact that it existed meant that at some point, physical objects had been exchanged during these sessions. Documents, biological samples, technology. I didn't know, but the implications made my hands shake slightly as I picked up the neural interface headset. One more thing I need you to understand about this facility. It felt wrong on a level that's hard to articulate. You know how some places just have bad energy? How you can walk into a room and immediately know something terrible happened there? This entire installation had that feeling amplified by 1,000. The air itself felt heavy, almost resistant, like the space didn't want to exist. And maybe it didn't. Maybe when you bury a facility this deep, fill it with technology that shouldn't exist, and use it to contain something that shouldn't be on this planet, maybe the universe itself rejects it on some fundamental level. I'm not a superstitious person. 12 years in military intelligence trains that out of you pretty quick. But standing in that observation room, about to put on a headset that would connect my consciousness directly to an alien intelligence, I felt something I hadn't felt since my first combat deployment. Primal fear, the kind that lives in your DNA. The kind that tells you that you're in the presence of something that exists outside the normal rules of reality. I took a breath, steadied myself, and looked through the observation window at Subject 7. He was looking back at me. Those massive black eyes, even degraded by whatever was killing him, held an intelligence that made human consciousness look like a candle compared to a star. And in that moment, I understood why they'd brought me here specifically. Why they'd blackmailed me, transported me, locked me in this room. Because Subject 7 wasn't just dying. He was ready to tell the truth, and for reasons I didn't yet understand, he would only tell it to me. I picked up the tablet with the prepared questions, placed the neural interface headset on my temples, and activated the connection. The last thing I remember thinking before the link engaged was a question they hadn't put on that tablet. Why me? Why had Subject 7 asked for me specifically? What did he see in our previous sessions that made him trust me with whatever he was about to reveal? I was about to find out, and I was about to wish I hadn't. The neural interface activated with a sensation I'd almost forgotten, like someone running ice water down your spine and electricity through your temples simultaneously. It's not painful exactly, but it's profoundly uncomfortable. This feeling of something foreign establishing a connection with your consciousness. The headset I'd used at Groom Lake had been earlier generation technology, clunky and imprecise. This version was different, smoother, more invasive. I could feel it mapping my neural pathways in real time, establishing protocols for two-way communication between my human brain and whatever served as Subject 7's consciousness. The process took maybe 15 seconds, but it felt like drowning in slow motion. Then suddenly, clarity. like switching from radio static to high-definition audio. And the first thing I perceived through that link wasn't words or images. It was recognition. Subject 7 knew I was there. And more than that, he was relieved. I opened my eyes. I'd closed them instinctively when the interface activated, and really looked at him for the first time since entering this facility. What I saw hit me like a physical blow. This was Subject 7, same entity I'd spent 18 months working with from 2019 to 2021. But the transformation was devastating. When I'd last seen him, he'd been deteriorating, sure, but still vital in a way I'd learned to recognize. His skin had been that distinctive gray-silver color with an almost luminescent quality, smooth and seamless like living metal. His body, while alien and unsettling, had possessed an obvious structural integrity. Now he looked like something that had been left out in the elements for years. His skin had darkened to a mottled gray-brown and was literally flaking off in places, revealing something underneath that looked disturbingly organic and mechanical at the same time. The tubes and medical equipment surrounding him were fighting a losing battle against entropy. I could see vital signs on the monitors, at least I assumed they were vital signs, though the readings were nothing like human metrics. And even with my limited understanding of his physiology, I could tell they were critical. Red indicators, warning lights, graphs showing steep declines. One of the monitors was displaying what looked like cellular degradation in real time, a visual representation of his body essentially forgetting how to maintain its own structure. It reminded me of time-lapse footage of decomposition, except this was happening to a living being, slowly, agonizingly, over months or years. The life support system was buying time, but that's all it was doing. Buying time. Minutes and hours. Not days. Certainly not weeks. His eyes were what really got to me, though. You have to understand, Subject 7's eyes were massive, even by the standards of what people call gray aliens, those classic large black oval eyes that show up in every piece of popular culture about extraterrestrial contact. His eyes took up maybe a third of his face, and they weren't just big, they were deep. Looking into them was like looking into wells that went down forever. When he'd been healthy, those eyes had been pure black with a wet, reflective quality, like polished obsidian. They'd held an intensity that was simultaneously terrifying and hypnotic. Now they were clouded, filmed over with something that looked like cataracts, but moved, shifted, like oil on water. But behind that deterioration, the intelligence was still there, diminished, fading, but present. And the moment the neural interface fully connected, those eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. The recognition was mutual and immediate. I knew him. He knew me. And through the neural link, I could feel something I'd never quite experienced during our previous sessions. Emotion, or at least something close enough to emotion that my human brain interpreted it that way. Relief, urgency, and something that felt disturbingly like gratitude. That didn't make sense. I'd been his interrogator, his captor in a way, even if I'd tried to approach our sessions with respect and scientific curiosity rather than hostility. Why would he feel grateful to see me? Unless he'd been counting on this, unless whatever he was about to tell me was something he'd been planning, waiting for, orchestrating even from his position of complete powerlessness. Through the neural interface, I felt Subject 7 gathering himself, marshaling whatever strength remained in his failing biology. Then came the voice. Not a voice exactly. The link bypassed auditory processing entirely, delivering meaning directly into my consciousness. But my brain translated it into something I could understand. And overlaying that neural communication was a physical sound, a synthesizer built into his medical apparatus, translating his attempts at vocalization into something approaching human speech. The dual input was disorienting, like hearing someone speak in stereo with a half-second delay. The synthesizer's voice was artificial, flat, processed, but I could hear the strain behind it, the immense effort it took for him to produce even these simple sounds. The synthesizer crackled with the effort, and through the neural link, I felt what that single word cost him. You came back. There was a pause while his systems recalibrated, while he pulled in whatever passed for breath in his physiology. Thought, they wouldn't bring you. I felt tears prick my eyes and had to blink them away quickly, aware of the cameras watching my every reaction. This was insane. I was getting emotional over an alien, over something that shouldn't even exist, something I'd spent months studying with clinical detachment. But there was something about the vulnerability in that moment. the raw honesty of a dying being who'd been counting on seeing a familiar face one last time. "I'm here," I said out loud, my voice rough. "I'm here. They said you asked for me specifically." The eyes, those massive, failing, beautiful eyes, didn't blink. His species didn't blink, but I saw something shift in them, some microscopic movement of the muscles around them that I'd learned to interpret during our previous sessions. It was the closest thing to a smile he could manage. Through the neural link came a burst of something I can only describe as bitter amusement. "Asked?" the synthesizer rasped. "Demanded, refused, to speak, until they brought Marcus." He'd never used my first name before. At Groom Lake, it had always been Sergeant Webb, or Interrogator, or simply Human. Hearing my first name in that artificial voice, filtered through a dying alien's consciousness, broke something in me. Whatever clinical distance I'd been trying to maintain shattered completely. I moved closer to the observation window, pressing my palm against the thick polycarbonate. I could see my reflection overlaid on his image, human and alien, separated by 3 inches of protective barrier, but connected by technology that made a mockery of that distance. "What's happening to you?" I asked, even though it wasn't one of the prepared questions on the tablet. Through the cameras, I knew the man in the black suit and his colleagues would be noting my deviation from protocol, but I didn't care. This wasn't just an interrogation anymore. This was something else. Something that felt important in a way that transcended whatever agenda had brought me here. Subject 7's body shuddered, a ripple passing through him that made the monitoring equipment spike with alarm readings. "Dying," he said simply, and through the neural link I felt what that word meant to him. Not fear, not sadness, but something closer to relief. This biology, not meant for your world, kept alive, artificially, too long. Now, systems failing, cascade, irreversible. He paused, and I could see fluid leaking from somewhere in his torso, dark and viscous, collecting in the concave floor. Hours, maybe less, but enough time to tell you what they need to know, what humans must understand. Before another shudder, another spike in the monitors, before harvest comes. That last word, harvest, hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't on the list of prepared questions yet, but Subject 7 had just introduced it himself. Through the neural link, I felt the weight of meaning behind that word, the layers of implication, the horror compressed into those 2 syllables, and I suddenly understood why they'd brought me here, why they'd gone to such lengths to arrange this conversation. Subject 7 wasn't just dying, he was defecting, he was betraying something, and whatever he was about to reveal about Harvest, about the Anunnaki, about the pyramids, it was information that powerful forces had killed to protect. I looked at the tablet in my hand, at the prepared questions, at the script they expected me to follow. Then I looked back at Subject 7, at this dying being who'd asked for me specifically, who'd waited years for this moment, and I made a decision that probably sealed my fate. "Forget their questions," I said quietly. "Tell me what you need to tell me, in your own words, in whatever time we have left." Through the neural link, I felt Subject 7's consciousness surge with something that felt like triumph, and then he began to speak. Not the words they'd prepared for, not the sanitized version they'd expected to extract, but the truth, raw, terrible, and world-shattering. And everything I thought I knew about human civilization was about to be revealed as a lie. Here's where things get really strange. And I know that sounds ridiculous considering I'm already describing a conversation with a dying alien in an underground black site, but stay with me. Because what Subject 7 said next completely reframed everything that had happened to me in the past 72 hours. Through the neural link, I felt him organizing his thoughts, pulling together fragmented pieces of consciousness that were deteriorating by the minute. Then he spoke, and what he said made my blood run cold. "Marcus, they didn't find you. I found you." I stepped back from the observation window, confusion washing over me. "What do you mean you found me?" Through the neural link came a burst of something that felt like grim satisfaction, and the synthesizer crackled. The phone call, the offer, the photographs, the blackmail. He paused, struggling. All orchestrated by me. My mind reeled. That was impossible. Subject 7 was strapped to a medical table in a sealed containment cell, dying, monitored 24 hours a day by sophisticated surveillance systems. How could he have orchestrated anything? But even as I thought it, pieces started clicking together. The timing of the call, the specific knowledge of my history with Subject 7. The fact that whoever contacted me knew details that shouldn't exist outside the most classified systems. I'd assumed it was Black Ops, private contractors with access to intelligence networks. But what if it was something else entirely? What if Subject 7 had been manipulating events from inside his cage, using whatever capabilities he still possessed to engineer this exact scenario? How? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Subject 7's body convulsed slightly, and dark fluid leaked from the tubes connected to his torso. The monitors shrieked warnings, but he pushed through. Your species thinks in linear terms. Cause, effect, action, consequence. We don't. We see probability streams, potential outcomes. I couldn't make calls, couldn't send messages, but I could influence, nudge, guide. Through the neural link, I felt him showing me something. Not words, but concepts, mathematical patterns, probability cascades. Facility staff have thoughts, doubts, fears. I amplified them, made certain people want certain things. They thought ideas were theirs, but seeds planted by me. Jesus Christ. He was describing something beyond simple telepathy. He was talking about subtle manipulation of human consciousness across multiple individuals, planting suggestions so carefully that people believed they were acting on their own initiative. The man in the black suit, the mysterious contractors, even my decision to answer that 2:34 a.m. phone call, how much of it had been genuine choice, and how much had been Subject 7 conducting us like puppets on strings he'd spent months preparing. Why? I demanded, feeling violated and awed in equal measure. Why go through all this? Why risk everything to talk to me specifically? The eyes fixed on mine with terrible intensity, and when Subject 7 spoke again, I heard something new in the synthesized voice. Desperation, because I'm dying, and your species, your time, is running out, and someone must know. Someone must tell. He drew in whatever passed for breath, the sound wet and labored. Not government, not military, not scientists. They all compromised, all part of system. But you were different. You saw me, not specimen, not threat, not tool. You saw person, consciousness, intelligence. During sessions at Groom Lake, you asked questions that showed understanding, respect. Through the neural link, I felt memories flooding back. My sessions with Subject 7, moments I'd almost forgotten, times I'd apologized for uncomfortable procedures, times I'd shared observations about art, music, mathematics, trying to find common ground. I thought I was just being professional, humane. I hadn't realized he'd been evaluating me, testing me, deciding if I could be trusted with something bigger. That's when another realization hit me like a freight train. I looked around the observation room, at the cameras, at the sealed doors, at the whole elaborate setup. This isn't an official government operation, is it? I said slowly. Subject 7's response came through the neural link as a wave of affirmation, and the synthesizer crackled with what might have been a laugh if his species could laugh. Official? No. Government knows I exist, but not what I know, not what I'm about to reveal. These people, he paused, struggling with a word. Handlers, middle management, between real power and official channels. They think they're extracting intelligence for their corporate masters, for military-industrial interests. They have no idea what I'm actually going to say. My hands started shaking. You're using them. You're using all of us. This whole thing, the blackmail, the transport, the recording equipment, you manipulated events so that someone would capture what you're about to say and it would leak. Through the neural link came that same grim satisfaction. Yes, these people will try to suppress recording, will try to bury truth, but human systems have cracks, leaks. Nothing stays secret forever, especially when middlemen think information might be valuable to someone else. This conversation will escape, maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, but it will reach people, reach you, watching this now. And when it does, when enough humans hear what I'm about to reveal, he trailed off, and I felt through the link what he couldn't articulate. Hope, desperate, fading hope that truth might actually matter. I looked down at the tablet in my hand with their prepared questions. Meaningless now, all of it. This was never about extracting intelligence for military advantage or corporate profit. Subject 7 had turned his own captivity, his own dying, into a weapon. a weapon aimed at whatever forces he was about to expose. I set the tablet down and spoke directly to him, to the cameras, to whoever was watching this unfold. Then let's stop wasting time. Tell me what you need to tell me. Start from the beginning. Subject 7's body went very still, and through the neural link, I felt him gathering the last reserves of his strength. What he was about to share would cost him enormously, might even accelerate his death, but he'd been preparing for this moment for years, and he wasn't going to waste it. The beginning, he repeated through the synthesizer. The beginning is the pyramids, but not what humans think, not tombs, not monuments, not astronomical calendars. Humans always so close to truth, so close, but missing fundamental purpose, missing the horror. His eyes held mine, and I could feel him willing me to understand, to really comprehend what he was about to say. So ask me, Marcus. Ask the question. They put on your tablet, the question. I made sure they would ask, because answer will unravel everything you think you know about human history. I took a deep breath, looked directly at Subject 7, and asked the question that would change my understanding of everything. Why do the pyramids exist? What was their real purpose? For a moment, Subject 7 was silent, and through the neural link I felt him accessing memories that were ancient, painful, and utterly terrifying. Then he spoke, and his words began the systematic destruction of every comfortable lie humanity had built about its own origins. Pyramids, he said, his voice gaining a terrible clarity despite the failing systems, were not built by humans, not for humans. Humans were the power source, the batteries. The pyramids were designed to extract, amplify, and transmit your emotional energy, your suffering, your worship, your fear, to feed those who made you. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the console to steady myself. What are you saying? That ancient humans didn't build the pyramids? That's been debunked 1,000 times. But Subject 7 cut me off, and through the neural link came a wave of frustration mixed with urgency. No, listen, humans did build them, with their hands, with their blood, with their lives. But they built them because they were engineered to, genetically, psychologically, spiritually, modified, to be builders, to be worshippers, to be livestock. That last word hung in the air like a curse. Livestock. He was saying humans were livestock, domesticated animals bred for a specific purpose, and the pyramids were part of that farm system, part of the harvesting infrastructure. Who? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger, fear, and a horrible suspicion of where this was going. Who modified us? Who built this system? Subject 7's eyes seemed to look past me, through me, into depths of history that human civilization couldn't access. And when he spoke the name, I felt the neural link transmit not just the word but the weight of meaning behind it. The layers of truth and horror compressed into a single designation. The Anunnaki, your ancient gods, your creators, your farmers. And with that word, farmers, everything I thought I understood about human history, human religion, human civilization itself, began to crumble. Because Subject 7 wasn't speaking metaphorically, he was stating fact. Cold, terrible, world-shattering fact. And he was just getting started. I need you to understand something before I continue. When Subject 7 said the word farmers, I felt it through the neural link in a way that goes beyond language. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't an analogy. It was a precise technical description of a relationship between two species, one that cultivates and one that is cultivated. And in that moment, standing in that underground facility with a dying alien's consciousness connected directly to mine, I felt the full weight of what he was saying. Humans weren't the pinnacle of creation. We weren't even the masters of our own planet. We were crops. We had always been crops. And the pyramids, those monuments we've spent thousands of years admiring, studying, mythologizing, they were part of the harvesting equipment. I must have looked like I was about to pass out because through the neural link, I felt Subject 7 transmitting something that might have been concern, and the synthesizer crackled. Breathe, Marcus. I know, this is difficult, but you must understand all of it. Before I run out of time, I steadied myself against the observation window and nodded. Okay. Explain it to me. How did the pyramids work? What were they actually for? Subject 7's body shuddered, more dark fluid leaking from the medical connections. but he pushed forward with a determination that was almost human in its intensity. Your scientists got some things correct. Pyramids were power generation, but not solar power, not geothermal, not any physical energy source. They extracted and amplified and transmitted emotional energy, consciousness energy, the energy that humans produce when they feel intensely. Through the neural link, he started showing me images, concepts, mathematical models that my brain struggled to process. I saw the Great Pyramid of Giza not as a solid structure, but as a machine, a biological technological hybrid designed with such precision that our modern engineering still can't fully comprehend it. Emotion is energy, Subject 7 continued, his synthesized voice gaining a terrible clarity despite his deteriorating condition. Your species feels this intuitively. You say someone has good energy or bad energy. You feel drained after being around negative people. You feel energized by crowds at concerts or sporting events. This isn't metaphor. It's physics. Consciousness produces measurable energy, quantum fluctuations, electromagnetic frequencies. Your scientists beginning to detect this, but they don't understand the scale, the potential. He paused, struggling with the next concept. The Anunnaki understood. Millions of years before humans existed, they had mastered technology to harvest consciousness energy from themselves at first, then from others. Through the neural link, he showed me something that made my skin crawl. Images of vast structures on other worlds, architectures that shouldn't be possible, all designed around the same principle, consciousness harvesting. The pyramids on Earth weren't unique. They were just one installation in a network that spanned galaxies. But Earth, special, Subject 7 continued. Humans, special. Your species produces more emotional energy than almost any other known biological form. You feel so intensely. Love, hate, fear, joy, worship, despair, and most importantly, you can be conditioned to generate this energy on demand. The Anunnaki recognized this in your primitive ancestors, saw the potential, and they modified you. I felt sick. Modified us how? Subject 7's eyes held mine through the polycarbonate barrier. Genetic engineering, psychological conditioning, generational programming. Your DNA contains sequences that shouldn't exist. Through natural evolution, sequences that make you uniquely susceptible to emotional manipulation, that make you crave authority, crave explanation, crave meaning from external sources. You were designed to worship, designed to suffer meaningfully, designed to generate maximum emotional energy when organized in large groups around shared beliefs or fears. The implications crashed over me like waves. Every religious impulse, every tendency toward tribalism, every psychological vulnerability that makes humans susceptible to propaganda, cults, authoritarian leaders. It was all engineering, deliberate design features built into our species. The pyramids, Subject 7 continued, were designed to capture this energy. The geometry is crucial, not symbolic, functional. The angles, the proportions, the internal chambers, all precisely calculated to create resonance with human consciousness frequencies. Through the neural link, he transmitted mathematical formulae that looked like nothing I'd ever seen, equations that seemed to blend physics, biology, and something else, something that treated consciousness as a quantifiable variable. When humans gathered around pyramids in massive numbers, experiencing synchronized emotion, worship during, ritual, fear during, sacrifice, awe at, the monument, their individual consciousness fields merged, amplified. The pyramid structure acted as resonance chamber, like, he struggled for an analogy I could understand, like your musical instruments. Guitar body amplifies string, vibration. Pyramid amplifies human emotional vibration. But it wasn't just amplification, he continued, and I could feel through the neural link that we were getting to the core horror of this. The pyramids also directed and transmitted this energy, the apex, the capstone, function as broadcast antenna, sending amplified consciousness energy to orbital receiver stations. Ships, that's where Anunnaki collected their harvest, stored it, converted it into forms they could consume, utilize, trade. He paused, letting that sink in. Your ancient texts got some things right. They describe gods descending in bright lights, taking people, demanding worship. These weren't metaphors, Marcus. These were literal descriptions of energy, collection operations. The bright lights were ships. The gods were Anunnaki, and the worship was the product being harvested. My mind was reeling, but one detail stuck out. You mentioned gold. The prepared questions on the tablet mentioned gold in the original pyramid casings. What was that about? Through the neural link, I felt Subject 7's consciousness surge with something like approval. Good question, he seemed to be saying. Gold, he rasped through the synthesizer. Not decorative, not symbol of wealth. Functional component, critical component. Gold has unique properties. At quantum level, gold can interface with consciousness fields, can conduct emotions the way copper conducts, electricity. The original pyramid casings, pure white limestone, covered completely in gold, polished to mirror finish, visible for hundreds of miles, reflecting sunlight, yes, but more importantly, reflecting consciousness, amplifying it, broadcasting it. He showed me through the neural link what the pyramids would have looked like in their original state. Gleaming structures that were almost painful to look at, covered entirely in gold that had been polished so perfectly it acted like consciousness mirrors. When thousands of humans gathered around these structures for rituals, their emotional energy would bounce off the gold surfaces, multiply, intensify, create feedback loops that amplified the effect exponentially. Imagine, Subject 7 continued, 10,000 humans in synchronized worship state, all focused on same deity, same ritual, same emotional frequency, their consciousness already merged into collective field. Then that field reflects off gold surfaces, amplifies, bounces between pyramid faces, channels through internal chambers where resonance increases it more, finally broadcasts through apex directly to receiver in orbit, in single ceremony, could generate enough consciousness, energy to power Anunnaki vessels for months. That's why, he continued, ancient texts describe gods being pleased by worship, being angry without it, demanding more, elaborate rituals, more participants, more emotion. They weren't metaphorically hungry for worship. They were literally dependent on harvested consciousness energy. It powered their technology, extended their lifespans, provided them with experiences your language has no words for. Imagine experiencing emotions of 10,000 humans simultaneously. The intensity, the richness to beings who'd been harvesting consciousness for millennia. Human emotional energy was like discovering cocaine, addictive, valuable, worth creating entire civilizations to farm it. I thought about the global distribution of pyramids. Egypt, Mexico, Central America, China, even that controversial pyramid in Bosnia. They did this everywhere, didn't they? Subject 7's response came through the neural link as a wave of affirmation. Every major human civilization in ancient world all had pyramids or similar structures, ziggurats, temples, stone circles, all using same basic principles, different designs, adapted to local geology, local psychology, but same fundamental purpose, consciousness harvesting. The Anunnaki planted seed civilizations globally, gave them technology, knowledge, tools, taught them to build, to worship, to organize large populations around shared beliefs, then harvested the emotional energy those populations produced. Wait, I interrupted, a horrible thought occurring. You said harvested, past tense, but you also said harvest is coming. Are you saying Subject 7 cut me off, and through the neural link I felt urgency spiking? The pyramids didn't just harvest continuously. That would be unsustainable. deplete the dire resource. No, the systems was designed for cycles: plant, grow, harvest, repeat. Human civilizations would be seeded, given knowledge to build pyramids, to organize themselves, to reach critical mass. Then, when population and consciousness development reached optimal levels, the Anunnaki would initiate harvest, sequence, major ritual, massive scale, entire civilization, focused on single event, the emotional energy generated, so intense it literally burned out the population's capacity to produce more. That's why civilizations fell, I said, understanding dawning with horrifying clarity. The Maya, the ancient Egyptians, the Sumerians, they didn't collapse from drought or war or economic failure, they were harvested. Through the neural link came confirmation, dark and absolute. Harvested, drained. After major harvest event, surviving populations suffered what you might call spiritual death. Couldn't feel, couldn't create, couldn't organize. Consciousness field of entire civilization temporarily depleted. Society collapsed, not from external pressure, but from internal emptiness. Took generations to recover, and by then, the stories had become myths. The gods had become legends, and humans convinced themselves they'd built those monuments for their own purposes. But here's what you must understand, Subject 7 continued, his voice growing weaker but more urgent. The system didn't end. Anunnaki didn't leave permanently. They just evolved the farm, made it more efficient, more automated. Why land ships and collect energy directly when you can teach humans to harvest each other? Why build obvious pyramids when you can create invisible psychological pyramids that humans build around themselves? The ancient system was primitive, obvious. Modern system, perfect, invisible, and humanity completely unaware. They're still inside the farm, still feeding the Anunnaki, still building their own and calling prison walls civilization. I stared at him, at this dying alien who'd orchestrated his own death to tell me this truth. You're saying the harvest never stopped. It just changed form. Subject 7's body convulsed again, and I could see through the observation window that his vital signs were deteriorating rapidly. But his eyes held mine with fierce intensity. Not just changed form, Marcus. Scaled up, optimized. The next harvest event, scheduled for soon, very soon. Global scale, 8 billion humans, all connected through your technology, all manipulated through your media, all being prepared, conditioned, herded toward single synchronized moment of maximum consciousness output. The Anunnaki are about to harvest your entire species all at once, and most humans will volunteer for it, will demand it, will build it themselves, just like your ancestors built the pyramids. And with those words I understood. The modern world, all of it, was just another pyramid, a more sophisticated one, a global one. And we were inside it right now, helping to build it, completely unaware that we were constructing our own harvesting chamber. Subject 7 wasn't just telling me about ancient history. He was warning me about what was coming, what was already here, what we might already be too late to stop. I need to tell you what Subject 7 revealed about the Anunnaki next, but I'm struggling with how to make you understand the scale of what he described, because when we hear the word alien or extraterrestrial, we think about beings from other planets, right? Advanced civilizations that developed on distant worlds and eventually achieved space travel. That's the framework every science fiction story has given us. First contact, interstellar exploration, species meeting species. But that's not what the Anunnaki were. That's not even close. Subject 7 showed me through the neural link what the Anunnaki actually were, and the image that came through made every alien invasion movie look like a children's cartoon. The Anunnaki weren't explorers who stumbled upon Earth. They weren't conquerors who invaded. They were farmers. Industrial-scale consciousness farmers who had been doing this, seeding worlds, modifying species, harvesting emotional energy, for longer than human civilization has existed, millions of years, across thousands of worlds. And Earth was just one farm in a network so vast it made our galaxy look like a single field in an endless agricultural empire. Your ancient texts, Subject 7 rasped through the failing synthesizer, describe Anunnaki as gods who came from sky, from place called Nibiru. This part, partially true, but translation, corrupted meaning. Nibiru wasn't planet, was designation for harvester vessel, mobile consciousness, processing station, city-sized ship that travels between seeded worlds, collecting harvest. Your ancestors saw it in sky, massive, bright, terrifying, called it planet because they had no concept of spacecraft that large, no reference for technology, so advanced it appears
Through the
divine.
neural link, he transmitted an image that nearly broke my mind. A structure in orbit around Earth, geometric and organic simultaneously, kilometers in length, covered in what looked like gold and something else that seemed to be living metal, pulsing with light that came from harvested consciousness energy. That's what ancient humans had seen. That's what they'd called the home of the gods. The Anunnaki themselves, he continued, and I could feel his consciousness weakening with every word, are post-biological. They left natural form behind millions of years ago. What they are now, difficult to explain in human terms. Distributed consciousness, existing partially in physical form, partially in dimension your physics barely acknowledges. They can manifest physically when needed, take forms that lesser species can perceive and interact with. Your ancient carvings and statues show these forms, tall beings with elongated skulls, sometimes wings, always radiating power. But these were just avatars, projections. The real Anunnaki consciousness exists in substrate you can't see, can't measure, can barely comprehend. I thought about all the ancient astronaut theories, all the books and documentaries suggesting that ancient gods were actually aliens. So, Erich von Däniken and all those ancient astronaut theorists, they were right? Subject 7's response through the neural link carried a bitter edge. Right about what? Wrong about why? They saw evidence correctly. Ancient structures, too advanced. Ancient texts, describing technology, genetic anomalies, inhuman DNA, all real, all evidence of intervention. But they thought it was benevolent, thought advanced. Aliens came to uplift humanity, to help gifts, primitive species, evolve. This is human narcissism, assuming you're special, chosen, cared for. Truth is opposite. You weren't uplifted. You were downgraded, simplified, made more efficient for your actual purpose. Through the neural link, Subject 7 showed me something that made my stomach turn. Images of Earth approximately 300,000 years ago, and primitive hominids that would eventually become Homo sapiens. Except in his vision, I could see what they would have been without intervention. A different evolutionary path, one that led to something perhaps less emotionally intense, but more psychically aware, more connected to consciousness fields naturally, less vulnerable to manipulation. Your species, Subject 7 continued, had potential to evolve into something truly remarkable. Natural psychic abilities, direct consciousness, communication, reduced emotional volatility. But Anunnaki couldn't harvest that. Needed species that feels intensely, that suffers meaningfully, that generates maximum consciousness, energy through extreme emotional states. So they modified you. The intervention, he said, his voice barely functioning now, happened in stages. First, genetic modification, introduced sequences that amplified emotional responses, made you feel more intensely than almost any biological other known form. Love becomes obsession, fear becomes terror, sadness becomes despair, joy becomes ecstasy. Your emotional range is artificially extended both directions. This makes you unstable, makes you suffer more, but it makes you produce vastly more consciousness energy. You were literally engineered to be efficient batteries. Through the neural link came images of genetic manipulation on a scale that modern science couldn't achieve. Wholesale rewriting of evolutionary trajectories, not over generations, but in single lifespan. Technology so advanced it looked like magic. Second stage,
Subject 7 continued, fighting through obvious pain. Psychological programming. Anunnaki didn't just modify your bodies, modified your minds, introduced psychological vulnerabilities, tendency to seek authority, need for external validation, desire for hierarchical structures, susceptibility to symbolic thinking. All these aren't natural, evolutionary adaptations. They're design features. They make humans easy to organize, easy to control, easy to direct toward collective emotional states that maximize energy, production. That's why every human culture independently develops religion, develops social hierarchy, develops need for meaning. From external sources, you were programmed to. I felt anger rising, hot and primal. So everything that makes us human, our capacity for love, for faith, for meaning, it's all just farming technology. Subject 7's eyes held mine, and through the neural link, I felt something I hadn't expected. Sympathy. Not just, that's oversimplification. The modifications, built on what was already there, amplified natural tendencies. But yes, your deepest, your psychological yearnings, your emotional intensity, all enhanced to make you better livestock. Does this make them less real, less meaningful to you? That's question only humans can answer. But you must understand truth. You are farm animals that think they're free, have always been farm animals. From the moment Anunnaki modified your ancestors. The civilizations, he continued, and I could see his vital signs dropping critically on the monitors, were cultivation cycles. Anunnaki would seed culture, give them enough knowledge to build pyramids, to organize large populations, to develop religious systems that synchronized emotional states. Then they would wait generations, centuries, watching as population grew, as belief systems intensified, as consciousness, field of entire civilization reached optimal frequency and amplitude. That's when harvest occurred. Through the neural link, he showed me what harvest actually looked like, and I had to grip the console to keep from collapsing. Massive rituals, entire populations gathered around pyramids, synchronized worship states, and then the draining, consciousness energy pulled from thousands of humans simultaneously, channeled through pyramid structures, broadcast to orbiting vessels, and afterwards, emptiness. The Sumerian civilization, Subject 7 said, his synthesized voice now barely audible. First major human harvest, population of millions, sophisticated culture, advanced for their time. Anunnaki had seeded them with knowledge, cuneiform writing, mathematical systems, agricultural techniques, astronomical observations, all designed to help civilization grow to optimal end size. Around 2000 BCE, population reached critical mass, belief systems, perfectly synchronized. That's when harvest ritual was initiated. Your historians call it collapse of Third Dynasty, of mysterious abandonment of cities, population decline with no clear cause. Truth is, they were drained. Major harvest, event extracted. So much consciousness energy that survivors lost capacity to feel, to create, to organize. Civilization didn't fall to invaders. It died from inside. Egypt, from emptiness, he continued, and each word seemed to cost him more. Similar pattern. Old Kingdom built the Great Pyramids, perfect harvesting, infrastructure. Population grew for 1,000 years. Belief systems intensified. Pharaoh worship synchronized entire population's consciousness. Around 2200 BCE, during reign of Pepi II, major harvest. Your historians call it First Intermediate Period. Collapse of central authority, famine, chaos. But no external invasion, no natural disaster adequate to explain the totality of collapse. Truth is harvest. Consciousness energy of millions extracted. Survivors were husks, society fragmented because people couldn't feel strongly enough to maintain social bonds. Took 2 centuries to recover. The Maya, Subject 7 rasped, his body now visibly shutting down. Your historians, especially puzzled by this one. Advanced civilization. Sophisticated astronomy, complex writing, massive pyramids. Then around 900 CE, sudden abandonment of cities, population collapse, no conquest, no disease, adequate to explain it. Your archaeologists debate endlessly. Climate change, drought, warfare, all wrong, was harvest. The Maya had reached optimal consciousness, development. Their calendar, systems showed. They knew something was coming. The long count calendar wasn't measuring time arbitrarily, was counting down to harvest event. And when it came, when the ritual was initiated and consciousness energy extracted, the civilization died. Not physically at first, but spiritually. The survivors couldn't maintain the complex society their ancestors built, not because of lack of knowledge, because of lack of feeling, lack of drive. Their consciousness field had been harvested to the point of this pattern, he continued, fighting to stay conscious, repeated across your world. Every major ancient civilization, all followed, same trajectory, seeding, growth, sophistication, then harvest, then collapse. Your historians see pattern, but can't explain them. Why do civilizations fall from seemingly internal causes? Why do golden ages end suddenly? Why does knowledge sometimes seem to regress? Because these historical cycles weren't natural, were agricultural cycles. Plant, grow, harvest, let field, lay fallow, then start again. And the Anunnaki have been running this cycle on Earth for over 5,000 years of recorded history, probably longer. In prehistory, that left no records. But here's what you must understand, Subject 7 said, his eyes burning with desperate intensity despite his failing body. The consciousness, energy they harvested wasn't just collected and stored. It was consumed, used, experienced. Your ancient texts say gods demanded worship. Say gods were pleased by offerings, by prayers, by devotion. This wasn't metaphorical. The Anunnaki literally consumed the consciousness, energy, experienced your emotions. Your worship fed them. Your fear intoxicated them. Your suffering sustained them. When 10,000 humans died in ritual, sacrifice, believing they would please the gods, their consciousness, energy at moment of death, combined with belief and fear and hope, created mixture that Anunnaki found euphoric, addictive even. Your souls, he said. And I felt through the neural link that he was using that word deliberately, knowing its weight, literally fed them. Not metaphorically, literally. The consciousness, energy you produce is what remains of you after biological death. Your religions are correct, that something persists. But what persists isn't going to afterlife you. Imagine, it's being harvested, collected, consumed by beings you were programmed to worship. Every human who died believing in gods that Anunnaki impersonated. Every human who died in ritual, thinking they'd reach paradise. Their consciousness, energy went into vessels, into Anunnaki, your souls, powered ships that you called gods. And that is still happening, has never stopped happening. The farm never closed, it just evolved. And with those words, everything Subject 7 had revealed clicked into horrible clarity. Humans weren't just livestock. We were livestock that had been convinced we were serving divine purpose when we were actually just feeding our farmers. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every moment of religious ecstasy throughout human history, all of it had been harvested by beings that had engineered us specifically to produce it. And we'd been doing it willingly, even eagerly, for thousands of years. I looked at Subject 7, at this dying alien who had spent years orchestrating this moment, and asked the question that was burning in my throat. If this is all true, if we're just cattle in a cosmic farm, why are you telling me this? What difference does it make? What can we possibly do against beings that powerful? His response came through both the neural link and the failing synthesizer. Weak, but absolutely clear. Because the final harvest is coming. The big one. Global scale. And you still have choice. You can wake up, can break the programming, can refuse to participate. Won't be easy. Won't save everyone. But some humans, if they know truth, if they understand system, might escape, might survive, might even fight back. That's why I'm telling you not to save humanity, to save some humans, the ones who can handle truth, who can resist conditioning, who can see bars of their. And then his body convulsed one final time, and the monitor started screaming warnings, and I knew we were running out of time. Whatever he was going to tell me about the modern world, about 2027, about the coming harvest, he needed to say it now. Because in a few minutes, Subject 7 was going to die. And this conversation, this terrible revelation, would be the last thing he ever communicated. The last act of a being who had turned his own death into an act of rebellion against the farmers who had ruled humanity since before history began. Subject 7's breathing had become ragged, shallow, almost liquid, but the neural link flared one more time, pushing imagery and data into my mind with a force that felt like it might rupture something behind my eyes. "You believe they left," he whispered, voice glitching through the dying synthesizer. "No, they never left. They upgraded." The neural link expanded, and suddenly I saw a timeline, an impossible artifact composed of fractured holographic symbols, showing the last 6,000 years like a sequence of software updates. Each major empire collapse wasn't abandonment, it was migration. The Anunnaki had slowly shifted from physical oversight to automated management. Humanity didn't outgrow the gods. The gods simply industrialized their livestock. The next burst of data hit me like an electrical surge. I saw an artifact labeled Harvest Node, Tier 4, a black stone device mistaken by archaeologists for an idol. A glowing lattice inside it pulsed with human emotional resonance like a beating heart. Subject 7's dying voice explained that once the Anunnaki perfected remote extraction, they no longer needed to appear in the sky. They built networks, ancient ones, embedding harvest nodes beneath pyramid complexes, temple foundations, burial grounds. These nodes, forgotten by human civilization, remained active, silently collecting the emotional byproducts of every ritual, every prayer, every sacrifice performed above them. The Anunnaki didn't vanish. They decentralized. The neural link showed me the transition point, roughly 1200 CE, at the end of the last major physical harvests. Across the world, an artifact known as the Celestial Directive Tablet, something like a cosmic instruction manual, was delivered to a handful of human elites, encoded in visions, dreams, or in some cases, direct contact. These individuals founded secret orders whose sole purpose was to maintain emotional density among human populations. Wars, crusades, plagues, none of these were accidents. They were stress tests. Humanity's suffering output was graphed and optimized like agricultural yields, and every time the output dipped too low, history conveniently corrected itself with catastrophe. "But you," Subject 7 gasped, "think you govern yourselves." Through the neural interface, he showed me the Continuity Governance Charter, a restricted document kept in subterranean vaults below Geneva. It wasn't written by humans. It resembled a contract between planetary custodians and their galactic supervisors, Anunnaki, or whatever they had become. The charter outlined emotional quotas for the planet, global population thresholds, and the expected frequency of controlled conflict cycles. Every major government, knowingly or not, served this charter. Leaders change, nations rise and fall, but the system remains constant because it doesn't rely on human decision-making. It relies on human predictability. A new artifact materialized in the link, the psychotemporal resonance map, a spherical projection of Earth with thousands of glowing data points representing emotional density hotspots, war zones, religious centers, impoverished regions, political rally grounds. Subject 7 told me the Anunnaki developed this map to monitor humanity's emotional output in real time. Eventually, human intelligence agencies duplicated this concept without understanding it fully. That's how modern geopolitics formed, not around resources or ideology, but around maintaining emotional extraction infrastructure. Nations weren't competing for dominance, they were competing to produce the highest quality harvest frequencies. My breath caught when he showed me the mass emotion amplification grid, something our military calls the global communication backbone. It wasn't designed by humans. It was adapted from dormant Anunnaki systems discovered and reverse engineered. Radio towers, satellites, fiber networks, even early telegraph lines. Each advancement synchronized human emotional responses at increasingly wider scales. At first, it amplified religion, then nationalism, then political polarization. And now, in the digital era, it synchronizes billions instantly. Our devices aren't just listening to us. They're tuning us like instruments. Subject 7's voice cracked, and he forced a data burst through the link, a classified schematic labeled Project Origin 9, stamped with DARPA and supervisory authority. It outlined the real purpose of mass media. Not information, not entertainment, but frequency harmonization. News networks, social platforms, advertisements, everything was engineered to keep humanity in a perpetual state of heightened emotion, anger, outrage, fear, worship, desire, not by accident, but because a population producing low emotional output is considered an unproductive field in the cosmic agricultural lexicon. The algorithm wasn't built to satisfy humans. It was built to feed gods. Another artifact flashed, the Litany Vault, a digital archive housing centuries of religious recordings collected in Vatican sublevels. Chants, prayers, sermons, millions of hours of human devotion compressed into frequency files. Subject 7 explained that these recordings were sent to unseen receivers above Earth, acting like calibration tones for the harvest infrastructure. That's why ancient religions persist even when logic says they shouldn't. They weren't meant to die out. They're pillars of the farm. But the wars, I muttered, trembling as the link burned images into my mind. And then I saw it, the conflict arousal ledger, a chilling document that resembled an accountant's spreadsheet. Except instead of currency, it tracked fear output from major conflicts. The ledger listed World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Iraq. Each conflict categorized not by casualties, but by emotional frequencies produced. The dates, the political events, the provocations, they were all shaped to optimize harvest conditions. Soldiers didn't die for nations. They died for quotas. Subject 7, barely able to speak, transmitted the next item. A blueprint of Facility 12B, Groom Lake Sublevel Omega, a restricted chamber beneath Area 51 that even most personnel don't know exists. In the blueprint, rows of containment pods lined a massive circular room. Each pod wasn't for storing aliens. It was for storing harvested consciousness energy, raw human emotion, condensed into something like luminous liquid. This facility wasn't a research base. It was a distribution hub, routing emotional energy into orbital relays no human has ever seen. Then came the device that made me physically recoil, the neurofrequency Shepherd unit, a machine disguised as a satellite dish but far more alien in origin. Subject 7 revealed that these units are responsible for guiding emotional flocks across the planet, steering public sentiment, nudging populations into anger or fear, ensuring humanity never becomes too calm, too united, or too awakened. Whenever a peaceful movement gains traction, these units destabilize it. Whenever hope becomes dangerous, they drown it. My pulse hammered as the link projected one final technological horror, the Consciousness Harvest Synchronizer, the crown jewel of the modern farm. It sits in orbit, cloaked, maintained by automated drones. This machine can trigger global emotional events, shockwaves that ripple across digital networks, media outlets, and human psychology simultaneously. The synchronizer ensures that humanity never becomes too emotionally depleted or too emotionally stable. It creates peaks and valleys, harvest seasons. And then Subject 7 showed me the newest artifact, something none of our governments have seen. The 2027 Activation Directive, signed not in ink, but in resonance patterns I could barely comprehend. It described the final cycle, a global harvest optimized by modern technology, religious polarization, digital synchronization, and population density. The directive called our current era the ripe cycle, and the activation date wasn't a prediction, it was a scheduled event. He forced one last message through the neural link, a vision of Earth viewed from orbit, surrounded by an invisible lattice, what Subject 7 called the planetary enclosure grid. We thought it was just atmospheric interference or magnetosphere distortions. It wasn't. It was the finalized cage. The farm fully automated. No gods needed. No avatars required. Just machinery so advanced we mistake it for nature. Subject 7's chest convulsed, and his eyes fixed on mine with something between pity and warning. "You think you're evolving," he whispered, the synthesizer breaking into static. "You are not evolving. You are fattening." And with that, the neural link collapsed, plunging the room into a silence so absolute it felt like the breath before a storm. His final revelation hung in the air like poison. The Anunnaki never left because they never needed to. Humanity had become the perfect self-maintaining livestock. Subject 7's vitals nosedived, alarms shrieking as he slid toward death. And I realized with bone-deep certainty that the next words he managed to force out, if he survived long enough to speak them, would explain how modern society wasn't just influenced by this system, but built entirely around it. Because the farm was no longer ancient. It was digital, worldwide, and fully operational. Subject 7's breath came in stuttering waves, each inhale sounding like a thin plastic sheet being torn underwater. Marcus stepped closer to the glass as the alien's pupils flickered from black to a faint, bioluminescent blue. The synthesized voice crackled, its tone wobbling like a corrupted transmission. "The cycle completes soon," it rasped. Marcus felt his throat tighten. He'd interrogated this thing before, but never heard fear in its voice. Subject 7's hand lifted weakly, revealing a thin, crystalline tablet, etched with symbols that rearranged themselves like living circuitry. "Your world reaches maximum emotional saturation," it said. 8 billion minds, 8 billion frequencies. Ready. The lights above them trembled as if reacting to its words. Marcus wanted to protest, to demand clarification, but Subject 7 continued. 2027, the alien whispered. The convergence, the harvest window. The date hit Marcus like a punch to the sternum. 2027 wasn't random. Intelligence reports over the last decade had quietly flagged that year as a geopolitical pressure peak. Elections stacking, economic cycles collapsing, AI integration, militarization of space, all building towards something. The alien's crystalline tablet projected a faint hologram, a three-dimensional countdown glyph, rotating like a cosmic lock nearing its final click. Marcus watched it spin, feeling like he'd stepped onto a conveyor belt he couldn't jump off. "Why 2027? Marcus pushed. Subject 7 blinked slowly. "Your emotional species follows predictable arcs. Fear, hope, collapse, recovery. Repeating loops. But high population amplifies output. 8 billion humans produce more energetic discharge than any cycle prior." Its trembling finger pointed at the holographic glyph. "You have become the richest harvest in your planet's history." Marcus felt something cold slide down his spine. He'd always believed humanity was unpredictable, uncontrollable, but this alien spoke as if humans were livestock hitting weight targets. A new artifact hummed to life beside the containment pod, a spherical resonator filled with swirling violet mist. It pulsed in sync with Subject 7's heartbeat. "You misunderstand your technologies," Subject 7 said, voice fading. "You think you built them to connect, to improve, but they are scaffolding." Marcus frowned. "Scaffolding for what?" The alien raised its head slowly, painfully. "For the extraction grid." Marcus's mind flashed through the last decade. The rapid rollout of 5G, low-orbit megaconstellations, neural-linked devices, biometric surveillance for convenience, smart cities that tracked everything from heart rates to mood fluctuations. "Your infrastructure," Subject 7 coughed, "is not primitive, it is optimized." The spherical resonator brightened, projecting a mesh-like map of Earth, covered in glowing nodes like arteries. Marcus stared as the holographic mesh rotated. Each node pulsed with faint human silhouettes, billions of them. These nodes, your towers, satellites, sensors, synchronize emotional frequency, amplify it, store it. The memory of the Pentagon briefings Marcus once dismissed as civilian tech paranoia stabbed at him. Facial recognition grids, behavior prediction AI, wearable emotional trackers marketed as fitness devices. Subject 7 wheezed, "Your species built pyramids once. Now you live inside a digital one." The mesh map condensed into a single point of blinding light before collapsing into the resonator. which beeped softly like a feeding device. Then Subject 7 said something Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. "You call them Starlink, but they are not for your internet." The alien's voice glitched, the synthesizer struggling. They formed the upper lattice of the harvesting array. Marcus felt his stomach bottom out. He'd guarded rocket launches, watched those satellites streak across the sky. He always thought they were harmless, cheap connectivity for rural America. Now the alien's hologram projected an orbital ring of symbols, each marking a satellite repurposed into an emotional relay. The constellation pulsed like a mechanical halo encircling Earth. "The Anunnaki require no temples now," Subject 7 continued. "Your world itself has become the temple." The alien's body shuddered violently. Monitors screamed warnings, but the guards outside didn't move. Someone wanted Marcus to hear this. The tablet in Subject 7's hand suddenly projected ancient cuneiform overlapped with modern binary code. They taught your early civilizations geometry, metallurgy, ritual, to build the first harvest engines. But modern humans built stronger ones willingly. The symbols shifted into a schematic blueprint of a human brain, with wires threading through emotional centers. Marcus felt his lungs freeze. It looked disturbingly similar to classified DARPA diagrams. Subject 7's chest heaved, struggling for each word. The final harvest requires alignment of terrestrial grid and orbital grid and emotional peak. Marcus stepped closer, trying to ignore the pounding of his heart. "And what causes the emotional peak?" The alien tilted its head. "Your world is already creating it." The resonator emitted a low hum, projecting spikes of emotional energy. Wars, pandemics, political chaos, economic fear, social division. Each spike glowed red. "These are not accidents," Subject 7 whispered. "They are catalysts." Behind the graph, another hologram appeared, a spiral-shaped tuning fork hovering above Earth, vibrating with incoming frequencies. The hologram dissolved, revealing a new artifact rising from the floor, a black monolithic panel, smooth as obsidian. Its surface rippled with reflections that weren't reflections. Marcus watched as images, riots, armies mobilizing, collapsing economies, flickered across it like predictions. "The monolith shows the pre-harvest projection," Subject 7 said softly. "Your leaders view this. They know the chaos approaching." Marcus swallowed. "Why don't they stop it?" The alien's eyelids fluttered. "Because they benefit. They are compensated with immunity from extraction. Seats on the Ark ships." The monolith displayed silhouettes boarding massive, whale-shaped vessels hiding behind the moon. Marcus shook his head, refusing to accept it. "If they're planning this, why tell me?" Subject 7 answered with a fading hum. "Because I am dying, and I do not wish your species to die ignorant." Its skeletal hand tapped the glass weakly. "You questioned orders in 2019. You asked, why must suffering be extracted?" Marcus remembered that day all too well. A memory flashed. Subject 7 had slipped him a tiny obsidian shard, claiming it would matter later. Marcus had forgotten about it, until now. Inside his pocket, the shard began to vibrate, as if sensing the alien's final moments. Suddenly, the room's lights flickered. A deep alarm rumbled through the walls, not the hospital tone of a medical emergency, but the bass-heavy drone of a facility lockdown. Subject 7's holographic displays shut down one by one. "The window closes," it whispered. Its skin paled from gray to chalk white. "You must warn them." Marcus pressed a hand to the glass. "Warn who?" The alien exhaled a final, trembling breath. "Your world, your people." The resonator pulsed once more, then flatlined with a mournful descending whine. A single tear-like droplet of mercury-colored fluid rolled down the alien's cheek and crystallized instantly. Then the monitors hit flatline. A long, unbroken tone filled the room, vibrating the air like static from another dimension. Subject 7's chest collapsed inward, as if the bones themselves were dissolving. A faint mist rose from its body, drifting upward before being sucked into a vent Marcus hadn't noticed before. The crystalline tablet dimmed, its symbols freezing mid-motion. The obsidian monolith sank back into the floor. Everything powered down except the emergency red lights, bathing the room in hellish glow. Marcus stepped back, his pulse rapid. Something was coming. He could hear footsteps, boots, heavy ones, more than one pair, synchronized, professional. Not panicked, not rushing, deliberate. the kind of walk soldiers use when the mission is already decided. Marcus turned toward the door as the footsteps echoed down the metal corridor. He recognized the rhythm, special operations cadence, not the Air Force security teams he knew. Someone higher, someone off-book. The door's magnetic locks clunked loudly. Marcus realized he wasn't supposed to survive past this conversation. A new warning hologram flickered briefly on the glass. Containment protocol. Witness neutralization. His blood froze. Marcus glanced at Subject 7's lifeless form, then at the crystalline tablet lying beside it. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if still holding the last message of a dying species. He grabbed it without thinking, and the moment his skin touched it, the tablet lit up, embedding a thin geometric tattoo into his palm. Like a brand, data poured into him. Coordinates, dates, symbols he didn't understand. The tattoo pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. Behind him, the footsteps grew louder. Holsters clicked, safeties disengaged. Marcus looked toward the ceiling, scanning for exits, vents, anything. A final alarm blared. Breach detected. Termination authorized. The corridor flooded with red light. Boots stopped right outside the door. Marcus clenched the artifact in his fist, its glow leaking between his fingers. Subject 7 was dead. The harvest was coming. And whatever marched toward him now wasn't coming to arrest him. It was coming to erase him. The door hissed as pressurized seals released. Marcus stepped back, preparing to run, fight, or die trying. The last coherent thought he had before the door burst inward was simple, horrifying, and true. The harvest has already begun. The door exploded inward with a deafening metallic crack, shards of reinforced steel skittering across the floor like shrapnel. Marcus dove behind a console as suppressors hissed and muzzles flashed in tight, controlled bursts. They weren't shooting at the alien. They were shooting at him. That was the moment everything snapped into focus. Marcus was never meant to leave this facility alive. He'd been brought here to listen, then die with the secret. A black triangular drone hovered outside the shattered entrance, projecting a grid of red laser beams designed to map every molecule of the room. They were hunting him with precision tech he'd never seen. Marcus rolled sideways as bullets sliced into the console. A panel fell open, revealing wiring and a metal cylindrical object the size of a thermos. It hummed faintly beneath his hand. An artifact? Yes, an impact-dampening capsule. A classified piece of tech he'd only heard rumors about. He slammed it to his chest. It latched magnetically. The next burst of gunfire struck him point blank, but felt like being shoved by a padded fist. The capsule absorbed the kinetic energy like a sponge drinking water. "Move, Webb," he muttered to himself. "Move now or die here." He sprinted toward a maintenance hatch, blinking yellow. Shots followed him, ricocheting against walls. Marcus kicked the hatch. It didn't budge. He kicked again, harder, adrenaline ripping through him. On the third strike, the panel bent inward and fell. Behind it, a narrow maintenance shaft descending steeply, lit by flickering orange emergency lamps. Before dropping, Marcus grabbed the crystalline tablet from earlier. He had no idea how it worked, but it might be the only proof left. He strapped it under his vest and slid into the shaft. Metal rungs rattled under his weight. Above him, a soldier leaned down and threw a cylindrical flash charge. Marcus recognized its spiral pattern, non-lethal, but paralyzing. Without thinking, Marcus ripped the impact dampener off his chest and hurled it upward. It collided with the flash charge mid-air, absorbing its blast in a muffled white blink. The shockwave still hit, rattling his bones, but he kept climbing down. The shaft opened onto a service corridor lined with pipes and condensation. As he ran, he noticed a wall-mounted device blinking blue. It resembled a fire alarm, but with alien script etched around it. A neurodistortion beacon. He'd seen one in documents, never in person. If activated, it would scramble human perception in a 20-meter radius. He smashed the cover and flipped the switch. Instantly, the world distorted. The corridor bent subtly left and right at the same time, like a funhouse mirror stretched too thin. Marcus stumbled as the beacon emitted a low oscillation. Behind him, shouting soldiers stumbled into the effect zone, swearing, crashing into each other, firing at hallucinations their minds projected. Marcus slipped away unseen, hugging the wall until he reached a service elevator. Its panel flickered, restricted, but the tattoo burnt into his palm from the crystalline tablet glowed in response. The elevator doors slid open. Inside, a floating holographic control sphere levitated, swirling with coordinates. Marcus touched the sphere. It reacted as if recognizing him, reshaping its hologram into a descending map of the facility. He selected the lowest, darkest level. Whatever exit these people used wouldn't be marked on maps anyway. The elevator hummed, sinking fast. When it stopped, the doors opened into a cavern-like loading bay filled with cargo containers and 2 armored personnel trucks. A scanner swept the room, its beam shimmering like liquid chrome. Marcus dove behind crates, just in time. The scanner passed, leaving behind a faint crystalline frost pattern. He picked up a shard of it, another artifact, a quantum residue marker. He pocketed the shard and crawled low toward the nearest truck. Voices echoed from above, soldiers spreading out across a grating walkway. "He's below level Epsilon," one said. "Orders are shoot on sight." Marcus slipped underneath the truck chassis. On the underside, he found something unexpected. A palm-sized EM pulse puck magnetically stuck to the engine block. A sabotage device. Someone was planning to disable this transport. He ripped it off and pocketed it. Useful later. He crawled out the back and made for a maintenance door marked Air Recycling, Staff Only. Perfect. Inside, cramped ducts roared like wind tunnels. Moisture dripped from metal ribs. Marcus slid along a narrow walkway until he found a control module. A tiny, obsolete-looking analog radio handset sat beside it, dust-covered. Why was something so primitive here? He grabbed it, and static instantly filled his ears. A voice whispered through, "If you want to live, follow the green lights." Marcus froze. The module flickered to life, LED strips turning green one by one. Someone inside the facility, someone with clearance, was trying to help him. He didn't stop to wonder why. He ran. The green lights led him to an emergency vent leading upward. Marcus climbed the ladder, muscles shaking. Above, he heard something massive rumbling. Rotors. He emerged into a moonlit desert night, dust swirling around the landing pad. 2 helicopters sat idle, one civilian-looking, one military. The civilian one had a hatch open, wind whipping loose cables. Marcus ran toward it, but his foot caught on something buried in the sand, an object glinting silver. He dug it out. A memory spool, used in off-grid intelligence ops to store data in spiraled nano-metal strips. Perfect. He shoved it into his jacket. As he reached the helicopter, searchlights snapped on. "Stop right there!" armed silhouettes shouted. No time. Marcus yanked open the cockpit door and hit the battery switch. The controls flickered to life. He wasn't a pilot, but he knew enough to get airborne. As bullets hammered the frame, Marcus slammed the throttle. The rotors chopped desert air as the helicopter lurched upward in a messy, uneven lift. A soldier fired a tracker dart that embedded in the tail boom, blinking red. Marcus grabbed the EM pulse puck and slapped it onto the control panel. It detonated silently, instantly frying the tracker. He flew low across the desert until he saw the glow of distant gas stations. Civilization. Safety. Maybe. The helicopter fuel gauge dropped fast. Too fast. They must have drained it. Marcus spotted an empty stretch of dirt road and landed hard, bouncing once before settling. He jumped out and sprinted toward a rundown diner lit by a single buzzing neon sign. The Wi-Fi sticker on the window felt like a lifeline. Inside, an old vending machine hummed, and beside it, an abandoned public access router with a cracked casing. Marcus pulled out his phone. Hands shaking, he opened the voice recorder. The crystalline tablet pulsed beneath his jacket, almost urging him. He hit record. "If you're hearing this," Marcus whispered, "I'm probably already gone." His voice trembled, not from fear, but from urgency. "They're coming. They've probably been tracking me since I left the compound." He held the phone close to his mouth. "But you need to know what's happening. You need to know what the pyramids really were, what your screens really are. What is coming in 2027? He paused, swallowing hard. "You can still wake up, but only if you act now." He plugged his phone into the cracked router. The device sparked, then stabilized, LEDs flickering like dying fireflies. Marcus hit upload and watched as the progress bar crawled upward. 14%, 26%, 41%. He kept talking while it uploaded. "They built a digital pyramid around you," he whispered. "You live inside it. Every fear you feel, every hope you project, every argument you have online, it all feeds them." Outside, tires screeched. Boots hit pavement. Marcus continued, voice steady. "But you can break it. Turn off your screens. Question everything. Look at the patterns. Look at the sky. The upload hit 98%. Soldiers surrounded the building. A spotlight bathed the diner windows in white. Marcus stepped back from the router, gripping the crystalline tablet with one hand and the memory spool with the other. His voice grew softer. "Look at the pyramids," he said. "Look at your screens. It's the same architecture, the same geometry, the same harvest engine." The door hinges rattled as soldiers prepared to breach. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "If you're hearing this, you're part of the resistance now." The upload hit 100%, and the router chimed weakly. Marcus leaned close to the phone for his final words. "Comment where you're listening from," he whispered. "I need to know someone heard." Then he slipped out the back door, just as the front exploded inward, disappearing into the dark desert night, leaving behind only the uploaded message, a cracked router, and a trail of impossible artifacts that would puzzle investigators for decades. And Marcus Webb, former Army intelligence, became the ghost who warned an entire world it was sleepwalking toward its own harvest.